Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Barbie, a Comprehensive History. So, today I'm going to be talking about Barbie in the 1990s. So, as much fun as Aqua Barbie Girl just was, and for the YouTube listeners, I'm very sorry that you weren't able to hear it. Unfortunately, due to copyright reasons, I cannot put that at the beginning of this episode. Um, but we're going to have to take more serious note for just a moment. But trust me, this episode is really fun. There's a lot of not necessarily controversies, but a lot of like very interesting stories in the 90s, a lot of pop culture. So we're going to start out with just like the basics. So I want to get started with a Ruth Handler quote. And she said this when she was 78. She said, "I've been proving myself my whole life. I still am." And I really feel like that encompasses Barbie during this decade. She was around, she'd been around since 1959, and yet the company was still having to prove itself time and time again in every facet and having to change in order to keep up with the times. So Barbie siblings during this era, she gets Stacy in 1990, and Stacy's still around today. She's often confused with Tootie, which was the discontinued twin sister to Barbie's also discontinued brother, Todd. She's a sporty preteen, and she's not to be confused with another version of Stacy. Barbie has had a friend, and there have been many lines with other Stacys, also with IEs or with EYs. In 1994, Barbie got her younger sister Kelly, which is more around Tootie's age, and she stayed around till 2010, and we'll talk about that more later. But her doll idea still exists, but now she goes by Chelsea. So Kelly has blonde hair and blue eyes like Barbie, but she's much younger, beginning with the appearance of a very young child of around 4 to 5 years, and then eventually aging up to be around 6 to 7. Then we have Chrissy. She was only around from 1999 to 2001, and she was a baby, like a baby sister of Barbie for a very small amount of time. Skipper got some new friends. She got a friend named Courtney in 1995, and she stayed through till 2001. Courtney is Mexican American. And I'm going to go ahead, especially for this decade, and list any ethnicity, nationality, race that is more unique to the franchise. So I won't be naming every time a doll is white. So assume that if I don't list their ethnicity, it's because they're American specifically. But piggybacking off of the 80s, it's not that Barbie didn't have diversity before, but in the 80s, they really decided to make sure that like every major doll line had very equal diversity. And you can really start seeing that be fully implemented in the 90s. So Stacy's friends, excuse me. So then Skipper's other friend, Nikki, from 1997 to present, is African American. And then she had a boyfriend named Kevin, who was introduced in 1990. Stacy got a few more friends. Whitney in 1994 through 2006, and then Janet in 1994 also through 2006. And Janet was African American. Kelly got a few friends, actually quite a few friends. In 1996, she got Becky, Tommy, and Melody. In 1997, she got Jenny, who's Native Hawaiian, Deidre, who's African American, Marissa, who's Mexican American. And then 1998, she got Kia, who's Mexican American. In 1999, she got Maria, who's Mexican American, Tamika, who's African American, and Nia, who's African American. Barbie got another friend named Kira, who I believe in the 80s was referred to as Miko. I think it's supposed to be the same character. And she was from 1990 to 2001, and she's Asian American. I don't know if it's specified exactly where in Asia, but I believe if she is to be Miko, then she is Japanese American. Then we have the Generation Girls. In 1999, We got Anna Suarez, who's Mexican American, Chelsea Peterson, who's British, Laura Morelli, who is Laura Morelli Strauss. We got a long name, who's French, Tori Burns, who's Australian, and Nichelle Williams, who is African American. Now I want to get into some of the sets. So we have Barbie Power Wheels Jeep Beach Buggy, which I couldn't find the exact year it came out, but a ton of different models were coming out in the 1990s. So every kid who had one of these things, and I need you guys to imagine this because I don't know necessarily if everyone who listens is from America or grew up in the early 2000s or 90s. So I want to really give a grasp to the currency that were these Jeeps. So every kid who had one of these things was instantly cool and attracted every other kid like a vulture. Friendships were made and torn apart over these things. The amount of time allowed driving these little cars that went like 5 miles per hour was currency, especially since the battery only lasted about 30 minutes to an hour before needing to be recharged. I can't talk about how much if someone you knew got one of these things, you constantly want to go over to their house. Then there was the remote controlled Barbie Jeep, which came out in 1998, and this was for the poor children whose parents wouldn't or couldn't buy them a Power Wheels Jeep. And so at least their Barbie dolls got to zoom around. And there was something fun about being able to control it with a remote control. Another cool car was Barbie's pink Mustang convertible, which came out in 1999. And while not as cool as the remote controlled car or one that you could sit in yourself, this ride was one of Barbie's most glamorous. My Size Barbie, the first iteration, there were many, many more that I think are still going on, came out in 1992. And I'm super jealous of the Princess and the Pauper one from the 2000s. I was only able to find like one online on eBay, and it's being sold along with, I believe it's a Clara from the Nutcracker, My Size Barbie. And these things stand about 3 feet tall, so they're about the size of like a child that's going to be playing with them, if not just like a little bit shorter. Um, and yeah, the one that's being sold with Claris, they're $400 because it's about they range for about $200 each now. But when they originally came out, I believe they were like in the 15-ish dollar range. They were not expensive because by the early 2000s they were still only like $35. So they have never been really that pricey, which is surprising for how big they are. And a really big appeal of those was the fact that you could the clothes would fit you too and could be removed from the dolls. So you could take their clothes and just be like, okay, well, this is my costume now. Then we have Barbie Queen of the Prom game, which came out in 1991. And this board game reminds me a lot of quote unquote girly board games that began coming out from the 70s through the 90s, like Mystery Date, that were vaguely misogynistic, but still fun nonetheless. Then, not insanely popular, but something that really stood out to me was the Barbie Fountain Pool, which came out in 1993. I don't collect furniture and sets, but if I did, I would totally get this toy. It's stunning. It's colored with pastel pinks, purples, greens, and blues. It shows a multi layered pool with 2 layers of stairs, one up to the pool and one up to a slide. Both stairs have gorgeous pink plastic railings that resemble heart shaped metal ones. It came with small details like working lights and a real working fountain. Super jealous of this toy. I'd never heard of it before, surprisingly, and I was instantly hooked as soon as I saw it when I was researching. Now let's get into some famous dolls, and this is where we're getting into a more interesting section because throughout I'm going to be talking about any controversies or bigger stories that are linked to dolls that I'll be speaking on. So there's the Bead Blast Barbie, which came out in 1997. Like many of the more popular dolls, especially past the 80s, she came in many different hair colors and skin tones. Her outfit colors changed to complement these color changes. She had blunt bangs and long, gorgeous hair. The 90s Barbies really stood out for their hair. The main feature of this doll in particular was the bead she came with and the placing tool that allowed the child playing with the doll to decorate Barbie's hair with beads. Western Stampin' Barbie came out in 1993. And this Barbie reminds me of Dolly Parton much more than any of the official Barbie Dolly Parton dolls. And there are plenty of Barbie Dolly Parton dolls, but none of them I really feel do Dolly justice. Either the faces are off and don't look like Dolly at all, just more like a standard Barbie, or they try to look like Dolly but are not that flattering. And all of their outfits just are kind of bad, which is the main reason why I don't really talk about the um, Barbie Dolly Parton dolls because they're kind of unforgettable, which does not serve her right. So I like to think of this doll more as like a Dolly, an iteration of a Dolly Parton doll. So she's decorated with a baby blue cowboy boots, hat, jacket, etc. She's covered with white fringe and gold cowboy accessories like cowboy boot gold earrings. Her main appeal were the spurs on her boots, which, when angled right, could be used as a stamp that left behind bees for Barbie, surrounded by swirling ropes in baby blue. And of course, whatever color you stamped the stamp into, it'd be that color. But the stamp that the Barbie came with was baby blue to match. Then we have Earring Magic Barbie from 1992. And if you're a fan of Barbie or you're a Barbie buff, you know where this is going. So this doll always had a latex dress with mesh sleeves and neck area in bright colors. Depending on her ethnicity or hair color, the color would change. So we would have like Barbie. Barbie came with pink for her signature color, but you might also have yellows or purples. She was decorated in shiny jewelry, including obviously earrings. And this doll came with clip on earrings for the child to wear. Her hair is long with bangs and it's fringed all over. So, the next section I'm going to be talking about is a bit more risque, and I might tune out for a few minutes if you aren't interested in this aspect, just because the controversy that I'm going to be talking about gets a little interesting at times. But it's actually personally my one of my favorite Barbie stories ever to tell. It's definitely something like funny to tell at parties. Um, so Earring Magickin, and that's why I mentioned earlier, it's a very infamous doll. Came out in 1993, and so the Ear Magic line was large. It came with a Ken doll. Um, Ken was having difficulty selling during this time because most girls found his look to be outdated. Thus, designers went to young bars to try and find his right look. They took notes, then designed Earring Magic Ken. Listen closely to this description and see if you notice a quote problem. He had blonde frosted tips, tight black jeans, a purple mesh shirt, a purple latex vest, a singular hoop earring on his left side, and a large ring necklace. Yeah, Mattel had accidentally gay coded Ken. This is not a problem, except for the fact that Ken is supposed to be Barbie's boyfriend at this point, and he already had rumors of a different sexuality due to his metrosexual appearance. Viewers were quick to point this out, and the most glaring signs were the left earring, which is a common symbol for gay men in the 80s and 90s when they were out cruising. Cruising is a term for when gay men were at bars trying to go home with another guy. And these indicators would allow others to know that they were gay without them having to ask. And this was really important because at a time when the AIDS epidemic was not helping the stereotypically negative image of gay men in the United States, it was difficult for a guy to walk up to another guy in a bar and ask him if he was gay without running the risk of negative backlash. And of course, that's still a problem today, but tensions were especially high during this time. Mattel had no serious issue with Ken coming across a little bit gay coded. They just figure, oh, it's one doll who really cares. Um, However, the next discovery was a bit concerning for them, mostly just because it's a children's line. So his necklace was copied from observations made in the club, and it has risque implications. Unaware to the actual meaning, the designers just copied a fashion they saw on a few men while they were there. What they didn't know was that what they had copied was, um, well, what's referred to as a cock ring. It's essentially a sex toy, which is disguised as jewelry as a sort of inside joke. And so, consequently, Earring Magic Ken became actually the best selling Ken doll to this day because a lot of people went out and bought it as a gag gift or just because they knew it'd be pulled or they knew it'd be a collector's item, just because this was such a big story. So Mattel actually did end up pulling it from shelves, mostly just due to the fact that there were so many layers of things that were not what they intended at all, and it was a good call for them to pull it. However, tons of merchandise sold before they did, so you can actually buy your Magic Ken doll relatively easy. I don't collect Ken dolls. Most people that collect Barbie don't typically collect Barbie or Ken. Um, I mean, Barbie and Ken. It's typically some people collect Ken, some people collect Barbies. I mean, of course, some people collect both, or Stacy's, or um, Skippers, or Midges. You know, everyone has their own thing. I mostly am just a Barbie fan, or if there's a specific doll I really like. But I do kind of want this doll just for the humor and story of it. Plus, they're like 35 bucks because so many of these things sold that they're not a super rare item. Then there's the Troll Barbie, which came out in 1992. The 90s was a time of lots of commercial crossover for Barbie, and the Troll dolls were no exception. This Barbie doll is iconic. And I may be biased because I like troll dolls, but I mean, everyone kind of agrees that this Barbie is like really iconic. She's decorated in troll doll prints, accessories, and she has a little troll doll of her own. It's so cute. I really suggest looking this doll up if you're not watching the YouTube video so that you can see what it looks like. Then we have Caboodle's Barbie, which also came out in 1992. Caboodle's Barbie is another marking doll that came with her own little pink caboodle. If you guys don't know what a caboodle is, I'm pretty sure the name for the company came from the phrase "the whole kit and caboodle." Um, and caboodles, they still make them to this day, but they're not nearly popular enough. For people to really know what they are anymore. They were very popular in the 90s though. They're essentially like makeup and accessory like carrying case that folds out, and the style is one that you might actually see a lot in makeup cases today. Just not typically by the official brand. So Barbie came with her own little tiny pink caboodle, and she also came with her own makeup and hairbrush. But in order for them to be usable for a child to actually use on the doll, they had to be big enough. Unfortunately, this meant that they were too big to fit in her caboodle, which I think is kind of an oversight. I think that the Barbie should have come with little accessories small enough to fit in the caboodle, and then bigger ones for the child to actually use. Then we have Wedding Party Midge, which came out in 1991. Finally, a true wedding set, which is what kids had been promised since the first Barbie commercial. In order to keep Barbie unmarried, they still didn't marry her off because, like I discussed in past episodes, once Barbie's married, she's pretty much married forever. Because it'd be kind of grim for them to have her get divorced. Um, so they ended up marrying off her best friend Midge with Midge's long term boyfriend, Alan, who was also Ken's best friend. And Alan now has two L's in his name. The set came with Barbie as a maid of honor, Ken as best man, Midge in a wedding dress, Alan in a suit, and a flower girl and ring bearer. And the ring bearer actually resembles a doll that I will be talking about later, who hint hint is Midge and Alan's son. So it's kind of funny because he sort of ended up attending their wedding just in like doll sculpt. So then we have the holiday Barbies. My first real introduction to collecting was actually through my great grandmother, and I really got into Barbie initially from the movies. Shout out to Rachel for putting those on when I got hurt one time. That was really what got me started off on my whole Barbie craze. But my introduction to collecting really came from my great grandmother, who collected mostly holiday Barbies, but quite a few other types of Barbies. But those are the ones that she got consistently. I've since inherited these copious amounts of dolls that currently reside in my grandma's house. And they really started kicking off in the 90s, though they still continue to this day. Holiday Barbies are highly sought after by collectors for their glamorous and intricate designs. Then there's Totally Hair Barbie, which came out in 1992. This Barbie is one of the most popular Barbie dolls of all time, if not the most. With swirling patterns on her dress, a tube of depth to style, and a long crimped hair down to her feet. Her feet, I'm not kidding, it is that long. This Rapunzel of a doll is instantly unforgettable. We've briefly talked about the concept of hair play, which Mattel hadn't seen as being a big deal because at this point there weren't really any dolls that had stylable hair at the time when Barbie came out. And the dolls that were just had really short hair, like baby dolls and such. So they didn't realize that the term, or rather the action of hair play, would be such a big deal. And that concept has been replicated many times in many different toys now, like My Little Pony. But they just didn't realize it'd be such a big deal at the time. But the idea of hair play is that kids really like having stylable hair. So every time Barbie came with molded hair or hair that couldn't really be styled, kids just didn't react well to it. And this happened a lot with Ken. So then we have Super Talk Barbie. This came out in 1994, and this doll could somehow say over 100,000 phrases. A smarter woman could tell you how this is possible, but I am not that woman. I have no clue how they did that in the voice box. Um, I don't get it. It's a tiny doll. I don't know how they put in so many phrases, but I don't know. I'm not an engineer. But speaking of smart women, with the release of Teen Talk Barbie in 1992, not Super Talk Barbie, now we're talking about Teen Talk Barbie, some people began to believe that Barbie was not that smart woman. She came with a possibility of 270 phrases, but each doll only had about four randomly selected ones of these. One phrase found in about 3,500 of the dolls was, "Math class is tough," an attempt to relate with teens. However, coming from a symbol of femininity, this doll received backlash for the belief that she could be discouraging little girls from entering a STEM field. However, this phrase was found with many others like, "I'm studying to be a doctor." But the thing was is that, these 3,500 toys, they weren't getting all the other ones, and they probably didn't have them studying to be a doctor on there. So they were mostly just getting, "Math class is tough," or "I'm in class," or something. So I could totally see how an adult might take this the wrong way, but obviously it was not done intentionally. Still, the Barbie Liberation Organization took matters into their own hands in 1993. It's approximated that 300 Teen Talk dolls in New York and California were taken from stores and had their voice boxes replaced with G.I. Joe voice boxes. Thus, they said things like, "Eat lead, Cobra," "Attack," and "Vengeance is mine." Another response to this phrase was from a Simpsons episode called Lisa versus Malibu Stacy, which came out in 1994, in which Lisa objects to sexist phrases uttered by her doll, like, "Thinking too much gives you wrinkles." Obviously, both of those were parodies, though I'm pretty sure what was it, the Barbie Barbie Liberation Organization quickly dissolved out with people. I think it was mostly a joke, especially because of what they chose to replace it with. But I do think that it's very funny, especially because of the fact that some people bought the dolls and then came home only to realize that they spoke like GI Joe dolls. Um, I actually wonder if anyone's selling those. I mean, they have to be rare. I imagine most are probably returned to stores though and thrown out. Then we have Working Woman Barbie, which came out in 1999. And this Barbie came with a CD-ROM. Need I say more about how 90s this toy was? Now let's get into The controversies. Those that we haven't already touched on, of course. So, Oreo Barbie came out in 1997, and this was another innocent product placement. Oreo Barbie soon became a very controversial item, and for founded reasons. Completely unintentionally, Mattel had just made a very stereotypical statement. Like many Barbies at the time, this doll came in a white and a black model. The problem here is that an Oreo is a term for a black person who looks black on the outside but, quote, acts white. Obviously, there's no such thing as acting white, and the term is used to repel hurtful stereotypes that imply that black people are somehow less intelligent than white people. Realizing this mistake, Mattel pulled the line. Cher Smile Becky came out in 1997 also, and as you guys will see, 1997 was a very rough year for Mattel. This was another innocent mistake that came in Cher Smile Becky, who was from the Cher Smile line. This doll was the first Barbie doll in a wheelchair. She even came with her own ramp. Mattel worked with the National Parent Network on Disabilities and the National Lecotec, I don't know how to pronounce that, I apologize, Center, donating over $10,000 to the organizations in the process. This doll sold out in just 2 weeks and at every restock afterwards. The market for handicapped toys at the time being over 2 billion. What seemed like a great idea all around quickly caused issues when, and I'm totally going to butcher this name because I'm pretty sure it's Swedish. Um, I'm going to spell that for you guys. KJERSTI. I think KJ in Swedish is so Kirsty, I'm going to guess. Kirsty Johnson, a 17-year-old student with cerebral palsy, pointed out that many of Barbie's dream houses would not allow Becky to enter the door or use the elevators. Mattel announced that future house designs would accommodate a doll. And while I'm sure many did, I remember the elevator for my dream house growing up being much too small for a wheelchair, and that came out in the early 2000s. Now let's talk about Mattel's suing spree. They really need new lawyers. So, Barbie Girl by Aqua came out in 1997. Again, like I said, a rough year. The infamous song obviously falls under parody laws, but the fact that many thought such a risque song was officially associated with Mattel became reason enough for Mattel to sue, mostly to publicly distance themselves from Aqua. A really good example of something like this occurring now is what happened with Nike and Lil Nas X, and I can't remember the shoe company that was actually customizing it. But Nike sued Lil Nas X and the company for making custom designs of their shoes with satanic symbols. Um, Not really in order to get money. They ended up settling out of court, but more so as an attempt to publicly distance themselves so people would know that Nike wasn't officially involved. And so this is what Barbie did. Um, they lost the case, obviously, but more people were informed of Mattel's dislike towards the song, particularly towards lyrics that they found to be defamatory, such as, quote, "You can brush my hair, undress me everywhere. I'm a blonde bimbo girl in a fantasy world. Dress me up, make it tight, I'm your dolly. Kiss me here, touch me there, hanky panky," etc. Truthfully, I don't believe this song had any effect on sales, as while I'm sure some more conservative parents were turned away, an equal amount of people heard the popular song and got the urge to buy a doll. In 1997, like I said, rough year, Nissan created a commercial, and that resulted in them also being sued by Mattel. Um, Mattel claimed that it was viewed by some as canonical or endorsed by Barbie, and it did, quote, irreparable damage. But by replacing the dolls' names, the commercial loosely fell under parody laws. The commercial depicted a Ken type doll being left by a Barbie stand in for a G.I. Joe type character, and also being saved by the G.I. Joe type character after being knocked into a pool by the Ken character. This depicted Barbie as weak, Ken as weak, and the competing brand G.I. Joe as the hero. The commercial was sexist, but there was nothing Mattel could really do, so they settled. Food Chain Barbie from 1999 was a collection of photographs by Tom Forsyth. It depicted various naked Barbie dolls being cooked in a variety of ways. Mattel attempted to sue, but of course they lost because it's art and free speech and a parody. And sorry, but I'm actually very sensitive about this subject. I could totally see how not even Aqua's song Barbie Girl, but I could see how the Nissan commercial coming from such a big company. Um, and I mean, obviously they wouldn't win the case, but I could see them being upset about it for sure. But in this case, it's a photographer and it's art and it's obviously a parody and a social statement. Um, so of course they shouldn't have tried to sue them. Barbie doll Benson. This was in 1999. So Barbie doll Benson was the name of a Canadian nude model whose website name was barbiebenson.com. Mattel got into a trademark infringement case over the domain name. I don't see a resolution online, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that Mattel won, as it definitely could be a very real copyright infringement that could cause misunderstandings and backlash. Also, this doesn't mean anything as the model was popular in the 90s, but the website domain name is no longer taken, so it could have been taken down at the time over one lawsuit. Now I'm going to talk about the cultural impact. In 1990, a Black focus group was made by Mattel containing African American kids, parents, childhood specialists, and a clinical psychologist named Darlene Powell Hudson, in which they studied to create the most accurate range of Black dolls, changing facial features, skin tones, names, hair textures, styles, etc. Which is what we saw when we were talking about the 90s and names and just the amount of diversity. And if you look at Black Barbies in the 90s, you can definitely tell that they have more, or rather, they have less Eurocentric features than the dolls from the 80s, the 70s, the 60s. Dolls of the World was a doll line from Barbie, which was continued on into the 2000s, but were mostly prominent in the 90s. They included dolls of many different nationalities and races with matching garments. Some of these included Norway, Ghana, Ireland, Italy, Malaysia, Jamaica, Chile, and Germany. These dolls were very well received as designs and facial sculpts were accurate. It was especially fun and impactful for children in less represented countries to see themselves in such a large company's dolls. There was even an Inuit Barbie, luckily called Arctic Barbie, which is a smart choice considered the commonly used term that begins with an E is considered a slur by many. Now we're going to be talking about Barbie's careers as we do in every episode. So in 1990, she was a pilot and a princess. In 1991, she was American Beauty pageant girl and a United States Air Force pilot, a United States Marine Corps sergeant, and a United States Navy petty officer. In 1992, she was a presidential candidate, an executive, an elementary school teacher, a United States Army officer. Here's a little snuck in controversy. She served in Desert Storm. Oh no. Um, a rapper, which was a failed line, as you can guess. Though it wasn't, it was mostly the African American version of Barbie that was the rapper. In 1993, she was United States Air Force pilot again, um, and an Army medic, a police officer. In 1994, she was a pediatrician, a lifeguard, and a scuba diver. In 1995, she was an elementary school teacher again and a firefighter. In 1996, she was an elementary school teacher, a veterinarian. Might I say, Barbie is saving a lot of lives in the 90s with firefighters and lifeguards and pediatricians. army medics. Um, and she was also a chef in 1996. In 1997, she was a movie star, a dentist, and a paleontologist. In 1998, she was a NASCAR driver, a rock star, a Major League Baseball player, which her outfit really reminds me of the Alice doll from the Twilight series, and a soda fountain waitress. In 1999, she was a sign language teacher, and this doll has a very Cher Horowitz from Clueless outfit on, an airline pilot, a tour guide, um, and Toy Story 2 actually has a different edition of this doll, and a mail carrier. The quote I want to end us on is by Ruth Handler, in which she said, "I probably would have done it anyway." This definitely applies to Barbie in the 90s for good and for bad. They certainly didn't hesitate to sue, but they also weren't afraid to take huge risk in diversity and product lines that both backfired but also sometimes provided great representation. So that's it for Barbie, A Comprehensive History, the 90s. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, all the links to the sources will be in the description of the YouTube video. I apologize about the lateness of last week's video. It's still not up, but I'm hoping to put 70s Part 2, 80s, and 90s up all at once. I'm just going to get them all kicked out at once. Um, so thank you guys so much for listening. It means a lot. If you'd like to be reminded when I upload, then please check out my YouTube channel, Ellis Golden Music. That's Ellis Golden Music to get alerted every single time I re-upload these radio shows, and there's visuals in the YouTube version. So if you've already listened, go listen again and look at the visuals this time. It will, I swear, be a different experience. Because that's kind of the thing. I just want to point that out. You do definitely get different, but both fun experiences by listening live or on YouTube. Live, you get more songs, like the opening songs, and you get a few more tidbits that I don't find to be as essential um, for time in the YouTube video. But you get in the YouTube video some visuals and a more succinct version. So it's really about what you prefer. But yeah, thank you guys. That's pretty much it. And I hope you join me next week for the 2000s.